All right. Well, I guess I will get started then. Welcome to today's DSCoV workshop. The topic is the Agile Lab, Navigating Research Uncertainty Through Iterative Discovery. I'm Meredith Mendola. I'll be the speaker for today, and I'm the Center Program Manager. So why are we here today? I'm here to teach you a few things about Agile, not everything. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but today I want to teach you about how to manage work in smaller increments so that you're not just seeing the forest, but you see the individual trees that make up that forest. You're going to learn how to implement feedback loops and why they are so crucial for your continuous learning. Gaining some of these skills will improve your ability to navigate uncertainty and ambiguity, and that way you will be equipped to pivot when circumstances change. And that's really important. So, first of all, like, who am I? Why am I here? I'm Meredith Mendola. I have a very broad background. So, I was a forester and a plant biologist for many years, and then went into more agricultural research and ag technology, which led to digital innovation and product development. So I've done a lot of work with emerging technologies and blockchain, computer vision, natural language processing, like pre-ChatGPT, if you can imagine that. And during my career, I have gained lots of different skills, and especially things that are agile related. So I have some technical Scrum skills. I am certified by the Scrum Alliance. I also have many years of experience as an innovation coach and change manager. So I've actually participated at some level or another in an agile transformation in 5 different types of organizations. So I'm here to help you see that not only can Agile work in other environments besides software development, but that it is used in many different types of places. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what is Agile. I'm going to give you like a little history theory on it. We'll also talk about the difference between doing Agile and being Agile. Agile actually has 12 main principles, and I'm not going to bore you with all of them. We're going to talk about 3 that I think are the most effective and the most impactful, which is the smaller increments of work, continuous feedback loops, and decision making where the information lives. We'll also review some of those like high value benefits from doing this type of work, and then some resources that I can share because there are lots of them. So, first of all, what is Agile? And I'm calling it Big A Agile because it's Agile with a capital A. It's like a title of a framework and a concept. And this concept was born out of the software boom of the 1990s and became fairly official in 2001 with the publication of the Agile Manifesto. The main goals of this document were to provide ways to better develop and deliver software that users actually want, and finding ways to provide continuous delivery value. So here is kind of the intro of the Agile Manifesto. And what you see here is that this group of people decided that it was more important to enable the concepts on the left that are larger text and bold, like individuals and interactions, over the concepts on the right. So individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. Working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration is more important than contract negotiation, and responding to change is more important than following a plan. And the authors of this, rightly recognize that while there is value on those things on the right, we're not going to completely get rid of those. We value the items on the left more. So this sounds really cool, right? But I want to be realistic about a few things here. So let's be realistic. This was developed by a bunch of white guys in software development in the 1990s. And Because of that, it is still heavily used in software development. And it is very scrummy, which is what I will explain a little bit later. But because it's still heavily used in software development, there are other sectors and groups that sometimes decide that it may not be useful for them. However, as I mentioned before, I have seen this work in many different types of organizations and many types of roles. So, here, for example, you don't have to be in software development to use Agile to make your work simpler or easier. So you can use Agile concepts in program and project management, in qualitative data analysis, in communications, in design aspects. You can use it in the education sector, nonprofit sector, startups, health technology, finance, and agriculture. So it can be used in many different places and in many different ways. And that's one of what I feel is very cool about Agile is that it is very adaptive to your situation. As I mentioned before, there are 12 principles of Agile, and like I'm not going to read you all of these, but I collected them into little groups. So for here, the main principle here is that feedback loops are important. So if we think about this, like what is we want to bring joy to our customer. Who is our customer? In academia, we don't necessarily have a customer. It might be the data itself. It could be your PI. It could be you. Um, but here you want to make sure that you are getting feedback on a regular basis so that you can change and improve. So I took the actual principles of Agile on the left and then kind of distilled them into one concept on the right that is maybe more academically approachable. So don't wait until the end of the semester to find out your analysis doesn't work. You want to be learning earlier in the process if something is wrong with your analysis. Another principle of Agile is working in smaller increments. So it's important to always be paying attention to what we are working on and seeing the little bits and how does it work? Does it work? Does it provide value? If it doesn't, then we may need to go back and change. So we are always building, we're always measuring, we're always learning, and by doing that, you help reduce your technical debt. You can build smartly. You can incorporate design practices at the beginning, which is very important, especially for accessibility. And we can measure our progress by working research, like not how long you sit at a bench or on your computer, but how many small steps that you verified you completed without burning yourself out. Another concept of agile is decentralized decisions. So, knowledge silos, which happen in many places, don't really serve anyone's best interest. We need, the business or subject matter experts to be working very closely with developers and other folks to ensure that whatever it is that you are making or creating or researching incorporates the experiences and perspectives of everyone involved. Um, this also involves getting out of people's way. So if we trust people, if we have motivated people who want to work and we work with them to exchange information on a regular basis, we don't need a hierarchy to tell us what to do next. We can trust the people who have the information to make those decisions. So we give them what they need and we get out of their way. And the last bit on the summarization of the principles is that simplicity. Simplicity. So I think the first one, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is like my favorite thing. It's great to figure out what not to do, what to not waste your time on. So it's really great to be able to talk with others, calibrate yourself, understand what you're working on, and then um, be able to know what you do and do not want to do. So if you start noticing that you are doing tasks that don't add value to your research experiment or to your paper, then maybe these are tasks that should not be getting done anymore. So, as I mentioned earlier, that Agile is very scrummy. I'm going to tell you some things about what Scrum is. So, Agile is often implemented through Scrum, and through Scrum, there are these things called rituals, which in reality are meetings that should have a purpose. So I don't know how many times people have been in meetings and maybe you don't know why you're there, what the purpose of the meeting was. Did we walk away with any decisions or anything? It's just a time on my calendar and I don't know why I'm there. Whereas if you have a meeting or a ritual with a defined purpose, then you know why you are gathering and what the goal is for being there. So over on the right, we have this sprint planning, which is a software development concept, but you can consider it planning for your research. A sprint is just a shorter period of time. So we decide what to do next during that sprint planning session. And that might be based on things we learned from the last sprint review. And when we have a sprint review, we show folks what we've just done. So maybe that is the first paragraph in my paper. Maybe it's an outline for a paper. Maybe it is some code that I wrote in order to do some data analysis. It could be many different things. And we show that information to others so that they can give us some feedback and see how we might be able to improve what we have already started working on. Also common are retrospectives, which help us reflect on how we worked. So this isn't what we did, but how we did it. How are we communicating with each other? How are we sharing information? How are we deciding what to do next or not do next? So this is a little bit more of a self-awareness piece where the team works together to understand what went well and what didn't. Another concept is stand-ups, which are very, very common in software development. Um, I have seen them used in other situations, not necessarily just software development, but also in larger like project and program management groups where it's a very short time that is defined every day or specific days of the week. And you get together to very quickly say, this is something that's in my way, and I need help getting it out of my way. And you find out who on the team can help you do that. It also helps promote transparency across the team so that everybody has an idea of what others are working on and where they might need help. And in other ways, it builds connections. So for a long time, I worked for a German company and I was still here in the US. And all of my teammates were in Germany, but every day we met for 15 minutes and we talked about, things that were going on locally in our different areas, things folks were having for dinner, or what maybe I just had for breakfast. Um, it was a great way to build a relationship and create trust through this group by having a regular cadence of speaking with each other. Another concept from Agile that's very scrummy is titles of folks. So here we don't want to just take the title and give that to someone. We are using the ideas behind those titles. So in software land, a product owner is someone who is in service of the product itself, or the organizational strategy. And in research land, that person might be your lead author, your PI. Like they're focused on the why and the final paper, the final result of this work that we're doing. In software land, the Scrum Master is someone who's in service of the process and managing the workload. And they also serve as a developer advocate to make sure that developers aren't overworked. This might be in research land akin to a lab manager or a project manager. Focused on how we are doing the work and how to remove blockers so that others can get their work done. In software land, we might have a software developer that completes all the technical tasks and coding and advises on best technical approaches. And in research land, that might be an undergraduate analyst or a coder, the ones doing the core value work that is happening for that project. In some places, some of these roles might be combined or completely separate. There's also lots of other types of Scrum roles as well, but these are like the three core ones and how they can map to a research situation. So as I mentioned earlier, that there's a difference between big A agile and little a agile. And the difference is about whether you're having the mindset of agility or are you more worried about following a prescription or a protocol. So big A agile is doing agile. This is really focused on, I want to have those rituals. I want to follow a particular prescription, a protocol of steps that I'm supposed to do. I'm making sure I check off all those scrummy tasks that I'm supposed to do. This is not necessarily you actually becoming agile, little a agile. It is you doing big A agile. However, I do truly believe that starting to adopt some of the practices of big A agile can help you learn the mindset of little a agile. And for many people, you'll need those as stepping stones to be able to work in a completely different way than you were used to. So little a agile is the mindset, the being agile. That's your attitude. That's whether or not you embody the values of transparency and adaptation. Are we having continuous opportunities for learning and value creation? And it's the best way to adapt the big A practices for your team or your organization. As I mentioned, I've been in lots of organizations during their agile transformation, and I have never seen any org do it exactly the same way as another. It's been very different every time. Some groups like certain types of roles, some don't. Some like certain types of rituals, and some don't. And it's all about the work that you are doing as well as the people that are in your team. So a little bit more on the difference between big A and little a, and a bit more from a research perspective. So big A, you would get stuck in the waterfall trap. You're like waiting 6 months to clean a full data set before showing your results to your PI or anybody else. But in little a, you're going to do that in smaller increments. Let's clean the first 100 rows and see if this makes sense and see if I've made any errors. Show that to somebody and get some feedback on it. For doing agile, you may have a rigid protocol like sticking to a plan, even when your initial data suggests that your hypothesis is flawed and you should maybe do something different. In being agile, if you are having like a weekly paper party or data reviews where the team can see what you're working on and make decisions to pivot based on what the data is actually saying. For doing agile, there's often top-down decision making where all decisions must wait for a monthly meeting with whoever's in charge. In little a agile, where we're being agile, we have decentralized decisions where we empower people who have the information to make the decisions because they're the closest to the information. The decision should happen where the information lives. So, of all the things I'm going to tell you about today, if you take away only three things, it's that there's smaller increments of work, continuous feedback loops, and decision making where the information lives. So, how I'm going to teach you some ways that you can actually do that. So, one of these concepts is called Big Next Now. It is a mechanism of planning that helps you understand what you need to focus on at a given time. So while we know that planning is useful, sticking with a bad plan is not useful. So the nice thing about the big next now concept is that we can focus on the right level of planning at the right time. What do we need to do now? What do we think comes next? And what does our longer term vision or our longer term strategy look like? And as we have information and we learn, our plans may change. And it's the conversation around the planning that matters, not the actual plan. Because in that conversation, you're going to learn from each other about what might be your blockers, what might be things that you need in order to meet those different milestones. So I'm going to kind of put this in a submitting a paper concept. So instead of submitting a paper by October 1st, where Today is now, or the little thought bubble on the left that says now. And there's an arrow towards the big, which is submit the research paper to a journal by October 1st. How do I get from now to then? So while this is a finish line that we can see and it's necessary to have a goalpost that we can see, it's really too far away to give us like daily direction in the type of work that we're going to do. So if we can start to break this down into larger chunks of just into large chunks of smaller work, it will help us be more focused and it will make the big goal feel possible. So maybe we know that we want to submit or complete our data cleaning by May 1st. So now we know that's the next thing that we want to do. How do we get from where we are now to that next milestone? And we do that by thinking about all the different pieces that need to be done as our next big milestones on our way to the big, big goal. But there's even more smaller work that happens in between these next milestones. So you have to take this from a strategy that you saw into the action that you're going to take. So this is where the agile part actually happens. So instead of being stuck and procrastinating potentially, we are now able to see that by May 1st, we want to complete this data cleaning and sanity check all of our regressions. And we can do that through this task. Oops, this task today, another task tomorrow, a different task later in the week. And that will eventually help us with getting to our next milestone. What's really beneficial about this is that we don't spend a lot of our energy, our emotional labor on thinking about the big and all the other things that have to happen to get to the big. We are focused right now on how we get to our first next milestone. And that really helps you manage your work and your energy. So through the big next now concept, you get to maintain your momentum, right? So you know what your big goal is. You have some um, mileposts in the timeline for larger things you want to accomplish that lead to that larger big goal. And then you can break it down into even smaller chunks so that you can more effectively manage that work. So now we'll talk a little bit about continuous feedback loops. So continuous feedback loops, one of the easiest way to summarize this is build, measure, learn. You're going to create something, and you will create something usually based on ideas or assumptions that you already have. Now, whether that's a direction from your PI, whether that's some just internal assumption that you have. Maybe you've done some sort of research already or some user studies, and now you want to build something. So you will start building. And in order to know if you're on the right track, you want to share this with other people to gain their feedback. That is a form of measurement, their feedback. Then you analyze that information to learn from it and see what you can do to build again. And this starts the cycle all over again. So this is a very rapid, iterative process where you're always building something, measuring, and then learning from what you measured so that you can do this over and over again. So what are some ways that you can build, measure, learn in practice? So here are some of the more scrummy types of concepts, but I've also added how they could be related to research work. So a sprint review, where maybe in a more corporate context, you might review what you just did with a stakeholder, that might be a code review instead. Or maybe your stakeholder is your advisor or another researcher in a different department. It's perfectly normal to want to get some information from them and determine if you are on the right track. Retrospectives, where we reflect on how the work was done and how to improve it, these are often similar to project debriefs after something has been completed. The retrospective, the word retrospective helps add in a better understanding of that. We're really looking internally at what we did, and we're really thinking about it. I often find that a project debrief tends to be just like, yay, we did everything and it's over, but we don't necessarily learn from that. And a retrospective is meant to be sure that we are learning something from that process. Another piece in software development, like user testing and surveys, maybe that's more like a paper party in academia. Let's read what you've gotten written so far. Are your arguments sound? Do you are you put have you put together like a good rationale for why you're making this argument? Does it meet the needs of your most important stakeholder? Perhaps that's your PI. And do people like it? Like, what is just the feedback in general? Are we enjoying reading this, or I don't understand this, etc.? And then lastly is one-on-ones, which I personally believe are where the the most you will learn the most from others if you have one-on-ones and the most about yourself. So it helps promote psychological safety where you can share your thoughts with another person free of judgment, hopefully. Um, it's where you build relationships. It's also where you calibrate yourself against others. So perhaps you had an interaction that you didn't like with another person or in a meeting, and maybe you want to ask someone if, did I say that wrong? Can you help me understand if I, said this in a wrong way or wrote this in a bad way? Or maybe I accidentally mistreated someone. It's a good way to get an understanding from someone else about your own actions and reactions to the situations that you are in. It also is one of the places where you learn the most about the expertise of other people. So oftentimes when we are in a group meeting, people all the people that are there only get to say, one or two small things, and you don't necessarily know what their true contribution could be to this project or what their areas of expertise are that we could leverage if we just knew about it. Whereas when you have a one-on-one, you're much more likely to learn those things because you're going to have more focused and deeper conversations with people than you would in a group meeting. I have found that they are probably the most powerful thing to help improve your relationships with colleagues and to help make sure that you are doing things in the best interest of everyone involved. So now we'll talk a little bit about decision making where the information lives. So in classic research and in um, more traditionally organized organizations, we are organized by a hierarchy where information flows from the folks at the bottom to the people at the top, but the permission often flows from the people at the top to the people at the bottom. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of folks in here who have spent a week or more doing nothing because you're waiting for an email reply that simply said, yeah, go ahead, where perhaps you could have been the person who could have made that decision instead of whomever we were waiting on. For example, like the student at the bottom may have more knowledge. They're the ones coding the script. They're going to have more knowledge about a bug than the PI does. And the concepts in Agile empower that student to fix it themselves without waiting for a meeting or permission from someone else. In Agile, we instead of having a hierarchy, we have a network, and this is a network of empowered expertise. So the person with the most information here can make a decision regardless of what their title is. And we recognize that the different people provide different values and different inputs into our project as a whole. So if this is our project in the middle, and we have maybe a data science expert, a policy expert, a research expert, someone who's more involved with communities and the general public, if we listen to each of these people and allow them to provide their input on the areas that they know, we can create a more robust outcome that we're looking for. And we're also able to have decision making here while things are happening instead of waiting for someone else to give us the go ahead. And so, what are some benefits of this? We have faster cycles of learning. So, like changing a research variable mid-study because early data showed a more interesting trend, that is something you could do where you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that if you waited much longer to get feedback from someone. It also gives you critical thinking skills and can help you build your confidence. So you're making decisions, and now you are able to have confidence in the decisions that you make because someone else has empowered you to do so. We also have the ability to change and pivot if we need to, if we have new information that makes us realize we need to do something else. And as I mentioned earlier, we know what not to do, which is really great to know what you don't need to do. So you're not wasting your time and energy on those other things. Um, why is this so important? Because students, especially, are often overwhelmed by like the waterfall pressure concept of here's a big, big, big deadline on October 1st, but I don't necessarily tell you how to get there. That can be very overwhelming. And Agile helps make the work more sustainable and more human. And this is really important because you want to reduce burnout. Um, I, in my own graduate school experiences, had several friends who experienced very difficult mental health situations in graduate school. I have known folks who've gotten very ill during graduate school, and a lot of times this is due to increased stress and burnout. And some folks quit school because they don't feel that they can finish. Not that, I mean, if you want to quit, that's fine, but there are possibilities that you may have been able to last longer, stay longer in the program, really finish what you wanted to do if you hadn't been burnt out. And Agile isn't about working faster, it's about working in a way that doesn't break you, doesn't break the project manager, the researcher, and everyone involved. So, as I mentioned, these were like the big three that I wanted you to take away from this talk today about using smaller increments of work. Don't wait 6 months. Get some continuous feedback loops going so that you know how to respond to feedback and also how to give feedback. And then empower people to make decisions where the information lives. So, don't be too concerned with hierarchical control, but think about who has the right knowledge to make that decision. So I want to share a couple resources for you, some things that I like. So for big A Agile, like the prescription, the protocol of Agile, scrum.org as well as scrumalliance.org are the two largest like credentialing organizations in the US or in the world actually for Scrum learning. There is also the International Consortium for Agile, which is another organization. A book that I really enjoy is called Team Topologies. I actually have it right here. It is a really great book if you are interested in organizational psychology at all, and the ways that groups interact with each other and how to leverage people for their talents and help people grow and develop in the places that they want to be. So I highly recommend those. There's also some good resources for like little a agile. So just having a better mindset. This is a really great book, Mindset by Carol Dweck. Um, it is about having a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, and how having a growth mindset is something that will lead to greater fulfillment of your potential. It can also improve your relationships, whether that's with other people, with businesses, with school, anywhere. Sooner, Safer, Happier is also a really good book. This is about like noticing the ways in which people work and how we can help people uh, contribute and develop sooner, safer, and happier. So we promote the psychological safety in allowing people to contribute. And also, this little one called Magical Meetings is a fun book. tells you when you should and shouldn't have a meeting. Why do we have meetings? It can help you plan a better workshop and a better meeting. And then also another book is The Extended Mind, which is another really great one about like a growth mindset. So those are that's my talk for today. I like to say that everything's a journey. Nobody should be expected to become like a certified agilist or do everything exactly by the book. You are welcome to learn agile skills and adapt them to however you want to use them in ways that help and enable your teams. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Hi, Meredith. I just wanted to say thank you for this information. This is the first time I've heard about Agile and Scrum in detail, and
Oh,
now
cool.
I'm really interested to learn more. So it was super helpful. I just wanted to thank you.
Neat. Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Hi, Carrie.
I had a question about the sort of like making decisions, kind of where the information is, and sort of trading that off between like, because that sort of seems like it fits with this idea of like what you're doing now. But it seems like with kind of bigger decisions, like you would want to have those happening in coordination, maybe with other people. So I guess how do you kind of balance or like know when or like coach people on when they can be the one to make the decision and when they should bring it to the
Hmm.
group or when it kind of fits in with like the bigger picture.
So I think what you said off the bat is a really good starting point is the now stuff. The now stuff is where the people who are doing the work are the ones who can make those decisions. The big item, right? That's more of something that maybe a leader, a manager, or somebody decides is the goal towards the end. But they shouldn't get to decide how you get there necessarily, right? So there are multiple steps you're going to take to get there. And hopefully you are able to have more autonomy to do those particular steps yourself. I will say this again is not like a prescriptive thing, right? Like some of this is what you would learn from being on a team with people over a certain period of time that you have to figure out, oh, I made that decision myself, and then I found out that I shouldn't have. And that can be a style match between like your leaders and you. It could be where your organization is or isn't in an agile transformation, if that's something you're even trying to do. So it isn't a cut and dry answer, which I know is not the best response, but it's part of how I feel that agile is real. Like your relationships with people change and you will adapt what you're doing through those relationships. And so it should always be like if you find out that your team says we don't like having 4 stand-ups a week or something because it means I can't get this work done or something, I can't pick up my kid or something, like that's feedback you need to know, and then you as a group work to decide what is the next iteration of how that could look. Does that make sense, Carrie?
Yeah, I think I was just also thinking about because some decisions, sometimes like you have a decision that you make, but it influences, other people's work. And so that's where, like I like the idea of people being empowered to make their own decisions, but sometimes it just gets complicated when you have these like, interconnected projects. And I haven't worked with on a lot of bigger projects, so I'm kind of curious, I guess, a little bit of like what the scope is of where you would t typically advise people to kind of make the decisions themselves versus like bring it to maybe one of these meetings or to connect with someone like a leader who then would know maybe which people they should talk to about the decision.
Hmm. So I think this is variable based on the team that you're working in. I have seen groups where there's a steering committee up at the top, and though we have like empowered teams to make decisions, we told them they could. When they did make decisions, we had a steering committee that wasn't happy about that.
Mhm.
right? So the steering committee went against what they said they were that they were going to do. That's when you need someone like me or who like knows these concepts for innovation and agility to say, now you're going against the like ethos of what we decided we were going to do for this team and how to make this work happen.
Okay, thank
Um,
you.
okay, thanks, Karian. Alan.
Hi, this is great. I was wondering, you had this nice mapping of how terms come up in the sort of more research context, or you're working on a manuscript, and it seems like uh, we're some kinds of projects are going to be stuck in the land where we have to write a set of specific aims to a funder.
Yes.
The NIH is asking for a 5-year agenda. It takes a year to get funded, so it's like we're writing out what we're going to be doing 6 years from now. There's no world in which we know what we're going to be doing 6 years from now, but we kind of have to have this unholy mixture of, big, scary waterfall that we know is out of date, but then we have this like second agenda of how things are actually moving along with the shorter term projects and the people who are actually doing the work. And then maybe the PI, I'm trying to kind of map it back and say, okay, we did discover this thing, and we can kind of shoehorn that into saying that it answered that aim that we originally had, even though that's now irrelevant in a different world. But do you have thoughts on the sort of um, this mixture where you're still ultimately responsible for
Yeah. I don't, so I call that, or lots of people call that wagile or wagile, like waterfall agile. Um, and I think from a time, like a long-term time horizon scale, it's hard to get away from waterfall entirely, right? Because there are these funding cycles and strategic plans that last for however long they might last in an organization. So oftentimes you will have some sort of a combination where perhaps like people who set the strategic vision are more focused on the waterfall, the big, big, big picture. And then the folks who are the ones doing the work is where you can implement the agile. So like um as an example from my like history, I worked in agricultural research, and so um we might have like a larger overarching goal of we want to harvest so many rows of a specific trait of a specific type of corn or something. And maybe we've been told that that's the overarching goal, but we've come across some like different issues that have caused us inability to like have emergence of plants, or maybe we can't get a machine out in the field because it's muddy or something. So this is where like people who are the ones doing the field work, the ones who are supposed to actually obtain that information for you or that data for you, should be the ones that can be allowed to think and strategize on how to actually do that. Um, for example, in my own current work right now, we have like at Center, we have, grants that maybe are lasting for several years and are meant to be put towards specific like policy oriented research. And then we have some projects underneath that run more agile. So one of our projects is the Center IO portal, and like that has a product team and it has a group that is always working in a sprint format. So there's very fast turnaround on the work that they've done so that they can get an feedback and how to improve on it or make it something more useful for the user. But those people don't necessarily have anything to do with like funding sources and whether or not this is a strategic alignment and things like that, right? So it's it's a little bit of kind of like separating where your knowledge lives, where what knowledge do you have, what knowledge are you in, and then do you have the ability to make a recommendation for that area versus something longer term. Another thing that I would say is that I've been in an organization where like IT went agile, but like business never went agile. And so the two groups trying to talk to each other was very confusing at the very beginning. And we actually needed the IT teams to teach the business teams what is Agile? Why are we doing it this way? And so oftentimes you will meet teams that don't work in the same way. Hopefully there is someone who can help like translate these people's smaller goals into your larger goals or your larger goals into my smaller goals. Did that help, Alan?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Cool. Hey, Beth, you have a question too.
And thank you so much for this. Excuse me. I've heard this term agile for ages and I never knew much about it. So I really appreciate this. You might have said this, but let's say I want to start with like an Agile 101. I want to start learning about it. Of the resources or other resources you mentioned, like where would you want to start?
So start. I would say if you go to scrum.org or scrumalliance.org, they do usually have quite a bit of free materials. Or like even if you're not a member, I mean, if you want to become a member, I am a member of the Scrum Alliance because I have several certifications with them. What's really neat is they have like a resources portal and you can save all these articles and get like continuing education credits. Um, so I think they're a good place to start. I do think some of the books I recommended could be helpful as well. And I actually have another like presentation on Agile that I could share with you
Okay.
that might be helpful too. Um, I think to start, it's all about your mindset. And then if you want to pick like one or two rituals, meeting types that you think serve your department or your team, give it a try. Like maybe we should have retrospectives more often. That's cool. You don't have to do a whole ton of extra work just to have a retrospective after a project ends. Maybe you have a lot of people who are trying to coordinate work that like touches each other's work. That's where you might want to do sprint planning more because that's like a smaller period of time, and you might need this person to give you this information so that this person can make this thing, and that can help you get people to understand that the short time frame allows us to have accountability to each other to like get something to the next step.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. Beth, sorry. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, last call for questions. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. If you think of any other questions later on or whatever, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm pretty casual, so don't worry if you just drop me a short email or find me on Slack or anything. Um, Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. Take care, everyone.